What if I told you that one of history's greatest heists wasn't executed by thieves in the dead of night, but by an entire army in broad daylight? And what if the stolen prize wasn't gold bars or diamonds, but 6 tons of intricately carved amber panels worth over $500 million today? We're not talking about some random smash and grab. This was a calculated, state-sponsored extraction operation that required engineers, logistics experts, and military precision. And 79 years later, the Amber Room remains one of the most sophisticated disappearing acts in modern history. The mainstream narrative paints this as a wartime tragedy, a priceless artifact lost to chaos. But when you examine the logistics, the paper trails, and the strategic value of what was taken, you realize this wasn't about art. This was about power, leverage, and a treasure so valuable that entire intelligence agencies spent decades hunting for it. The Amber Room wasn't simply looted. It was systematically extracted, cataloged, and moved through a network that suggests far more planning than a desperate retreat could account for. Let's start with what we're actually talking about. The Amber Room wasn't a painting you could roll up and smuggle out. It was an entire interior, covering roughly 1,000 square feet of wall space in the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg. Picture walking into a chamber where every surface glows with warm, honey-colored light. The walls are paneled floor to ceiling with amber. Not small decorative pieces, but massive carved panels, backed with gold leaf, inlaid with precious stones, fitted together like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. The craftsmanship took Prussian artisans over a decade to complete in 1711. Amber, fossilized tree resin formed over millions of years, was rarer than gold in 18th century Europe. The amount used represented an almost incomprehensible concentration of wealth and labor. When Friedrich Wilhelm I of Prussia gifted it to Peter the Great in 1716, it wasn't friendship. It was strategic diplomacy, a physical manifestation of alliance. By the time the Second World War broke out, the Amber Room had become more than art. It had become a geopolitical chess piece. When Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, the invasion wasn't just military. It was resource extraction on an industrial scale. The Einsatzstab, Reichsleiter Rosenberg, was a dedicated unit tasked with seizing cultural treasures across occupied territories. Systematic cataloging and transport of specific high-value items back to the Reich. The Amber Room was at the top of their list. Soviet curators at the Catherine Palace tried to save it, attempted to dismantle the panels, but the amber had become too fragile over 2 centuries. So they covered the walls with wallpaper, hoping the Nazis would overlook it. They didn't. German forces reached the palace in September 1941. Within 36 hours, a team had carefully dismantled the entire room. Not smashed, dismantled. Each panel was removed, wrapped, crated, and loaded onto trucks. 27 crates. 6 tons of material. The operation required engineering knowledge, tools, and manpower that could only come from pre-planned coordination. This wasn't opportunistic theft. This was extraction under orders. The crates were transported to Königsberg, modern-day Kaliningrad, and installed in the castle. For 3 years, the amber room was displayed there. Nazi officials used it for propaganda. But in August 1944, as Allied bombing intensified and Soviet forces advanced, the castle curator, Alfred Rode, received orders to dismantle the room again and move it to safety. Then the trail goes cold. The final confirmed sighting was in January 1945. Soviet troops entered Königsberg in April. By then, the castle had been shelled, bombed, and set ablaze. The room where the amber room had been displayed was gutted. No crates, no panels, no trace. Rode and his wife both died under suspicious circumstances shortly after the war. The Soviets interrogated every German official connected to the castle. Nothing. The amber room had vanished. The mainstream explanation is that it burned in the fires that consumed Königsberg Castle. Amber burns at 600 degrees Celsius. Case closed, right? Except that explanation doesn't account for the logistics. 6 tons of carefully crated material doesn't simply combust without leaving evidence. No charred crate fragments were found. No melted amber residue. No gold leaf traces. Nothing. And when you understand how the Nazi command operated in the final months of the war, the idea of them allowing such a valuable asset to simply burn becomes implausible. Consider the context. By early 1945, the Reich was collapsing, but the leadership wasn't giving up. They were executing contingency plans, submarine shipments of gold to Argentina, art caches hidden in salt mines. This was an organization obsessed with preservation and future leverage. The amber room wasn't just pretty. It was a 6-ton block of concentrated wealth and political symbolism. If you're a regime planning for potential exile, you don't let that burn. You hide it. The first serious theory centers on bunkers. Königsberg and the surrounding area were honeycombed with underground complexes. In 1997, German researchers using ground-penetrating radar identified massive voids beneath the ruins of Königsberg Castle. Sealed chambers, bricked-up tunnels. The Russian government denied access to excavate. Official reason: structural instability. The radar data suggested chambers large enough to hold the crates. But without physical access, it remains speculation. Then there's the mine theory. In 2008, a German treasure hunter named Karl-Heinz Klein claimed he'd found evidence that the amber room had been hidden in silver mines near Deutschneudorf, on the German-Czech border. He'd spent decades cross-referencing wartime transport logs and eyewitness accounts. He identified a specific mine shaft sealed by the SS in March 1945. The timing aligned. The location made sense. Remote, defensible, and connected to rail lines that could have moved the crates out of Königsberg before the Soviet advance. Klein had died before he could excavate. The mine remains sealed. But here's the detail that keeps intelligence analysts awake. In 1991, after the Soviet Union collapsed, investigators gained access to classified Nazi transport manifests. Buried in those documents was a reference to a shipment from Königsberg to the port of Kiel in late January 1945. 27 crates, declared contents, fragile museum materials. Destination: U-boat pen. If the amber room went onto a U-boat, it could be anywhere. At the bottom of the Baltic, in a warehouse in Buenos Aires. Locked in a private collection in Switzerland, the Argentine Connection isn't far-fetched. After the war, thousands of Nazi officials fled to South America, using rat lines coordinated by sympathetic governments and former intelligence officers. They brought money. They brought art. In 2015, Argentine authorities raided a mansion outside Buenos Aires that had belonged to a known Nazi smuggler. They found 75 pieces of looted European art hidden in a false wall. None of it was the amber room, but it proved the network existed. If paintings made it across the Atlantic, so could crates of amber. What's critical to understand is that the search for the amber room isn't just about recovering lost art. It's about understanding how power structures operate in the shadows. Every credible lead points to the same pattern: deliberate concealment, coordinated logistics, and a network of individuals who knew exactly what they were moving and where it was going. This wasn't chaos, it was controlled extraction. And the fact that it's remained hidden for nearly 8 decades suggests either exceptional operational security or active suppression of information. The official Soviet investigation, declassified in 2004, runs to over 7,000 pages. The conclusion, inconclusive. But buried in the appendices are witness statements from German POWs who described seeing crates loaded onto rail cars in Königsberg in February 1945. Statements from dock workers in Kiel who remembered unusual cargoes being transferred to submarines under armed guard. None of it definitive. All of it pointing to the same implication. The amber room didn't burn. It was moved. And here's the part that should make anyone who understands historical manipulation sit up. Every major search for the amber room has been either blocked, delayed, or mysteriously defunded at critical moments. The Königsberg excavation, the mine in Deutsch-Neudorf. Each time, just as investigators were closing in, access was revoked, permits were denied, or funding disappeared. Coincidence or coordination? When you're dealing with an artifact this valuable, you're dealing with governments, intelligence agencies, and private collectors who understand that some secrets are worth more hidden than revealed. So where is it? Based on the evidence, 10% chance it burned. 20% chance it's underwater. 30% chance it's in a sealed bunker or mine somewhere in Eastern Europe. And 40% chance it's in private hands, either broken down and sold off, or sitting intact in a vault owned by someone powerful enough to keep it hidden. Because if there's one thing history teaches us, it's that the most valuable things don't disappear. They just change ownership. The amber room isn't just a missing artifact. It's a case study in how strategic assets move through black networks, how information is controlled, and how entire governments can coordinate to keep something hidden. Somewhere in a basement, a bunker, or a shipping container, 6 tons of carved amber are waiting. And whoever finds it won't just uncover a treasure. They'll uncover a network that's been operational for 80 years.